Hello, and welcome to an episode of the Making of Madrid with me, Felicity Hughes. I'm a journalist and tour guide, and I'm the presenter of this show, which is all about life in Madrid. And today's topic is going to be where to stay in Madrid. So if you're thinking of coming here on holiday, this will give you a good overview of the different areas. And I always say it depends on what you're looking for, although I do have my particular favorite areas. You might gain some insight into Madrid's different neighborhoods as well if you're thinking of moving here or thinking of making a move, because I've been living in the city for over 10 years. I'm the correspondent for Lonely Planet's guidebooks to Madrid. I write a lot about Madrid. It's really my bag. So hopefully you'll learn a thing or two here. But if you want to add anything to this topic, please get in touch and write me a message. Anyway, let's get back to the topic in hand, which is where to stay in Madrid. And right out of the box, I'm going to say something surprising, because I really do not recommend you stay in Barrio Salamanca. And I've seen Salamanca recommended in other places because it offers very, very high-end luxury accommodation. But in my view, it's quite far from the big sites and it lacks any kind of warmth. I mean, you can go and shop in Gucci or Louis Vuitton or Corte Inglés. It's very pijo or posh, pijo as they say in Spain and posh in English. But it doesn't have much of a soul. And I got some insight into this very recently because I've been doing research into Barrio Salamanca for historical tour. And I got to learn all about the Marquis de Salamanca, who's the guy who basically created this as Madrid's first housing estate. Now, in the mid-19th century, Madrid had become really, really overcrowded. There were lots of epidemics going on, and so the city needed to expand. So what was done, which was really logical, was Isabella II, the queen at the time, asked this architect to draw up plans, and he drew up plans for new neighbourhoods that would be built along a grid network with parks, and it was a way to make the city breathe. The walls of Madrid were no longer needed, taxes weren't collected when people are coming in and out of the city, and so things started this way. Unfortunately, even though she was a female queen and just the second queen after Isabella I, who, of course, famously ruled in 1492 when America was, inside quotes, discovered by Columbus. Isabella II, who was queen in the late 19th century, which is centuries later, the second queen of Spain, was terribly corrupt. She was dreadful. She'd sort of taken this on from her mother, who had married this guy who was really good friends with, guess who? The Marquis of Salamanca. And they were both kind of self-made men, well, in the fact that they got themselves well connected to the royal family and began to milk it for all it was worth. He initially made his fortune in the stock market because he got insider information. And I never quite know how this works, but sold short or sold long, knowing the market was going to crash because of some insider political information. And he had this inside information about the new neighborhood, so he bought up tons and tons of land. Massive crook. He got his comeuppance, though, because just as the barrio was being built, as the wall was knocked down, Isabella was deposed, and he found himself, not directly plugged into the powers that be. So that meant he couldn't kind of make money hand over fist as he had done in the past. And he started cutting costs. So Salamanca was meant to have lots of nice parks. He scrapped those right out the bat. So if you do want to stay in Salamanca, stay in the side closest to Retiro Park, because although the area enjoys a cooler climate because it gets the winds from the north coming down, it's actually really pretty hot because it's still a concrete jungle. And he also made sure that the buildings went higher. Anyway, the whole thing bankrupted him in the end, and he died penniless, they say, but he still, had a few mansions left over. Anyway, moving on from that. I just don't recommend Barrio Salamanca because you're quite far from the main sites. And you'll be paying a lot. It's very expensive. And there are plenty of other luxury hotels to choose from in the center that are marvelous. So you've got the Four Seasons, for example, which is right next to Sol. And it was built very cleverly in the shell of this 19th century building, which basically they could only maintain the facade, which is beautiful. And it has these lovely elephant heads under the windows, and oh God, great building, and, really splendid hotel, as you might imagine. There's the Mandarin Oriental Ritz, which overlooks the Prado. So neither of those are in Salamanca, and they're both central. So what I'm going to do more is move into other areas of Madrid. And my top recommendation, and this is entirely personal, I suppose, is La Latina. Now, La Latina is very historic, but it's quieter than the historic center of Madrid. So it's the part that was built when the Moors, or the Muslim residents of Madrid, were thrown outside the city walls, and the city walls were first expanded, but still in medieval times. So they lived around there from like the 12th century onwards. So it used to be known as the Moreria. And it's just charming. It's built on a slight slope, so you may have a bit of a problem with that, but its central square of Plaza de la Paja is gorgeous with this little hidden garden. There's the Jardín de las Vistillas, which give you beautiful views out towards the cathedral. Absolutely stunning. And I particularly recommend if people they stay somewhere incredibly historic, which is the Cava Baja. Now, this road was built on top of Madrid's city walls, and some of them, these buildings, which used to be old sort of stagecoach places, when people came in to do business in old Madrid in the late 19th century, they would stay in what's called a posada, which all run along the line of the old city walls. And some of these posadas have got inside this traditional kind of architecture in Madrid called corralas. Now, a corrala is like an interior courtyard. And two of the best are Posada del Dragón and Posada León del Oro, because not only can you see the 12th century Christian wall under glass in the sort of bar restaurant areas, you can also go out into an interior corrala. And that brings me to a really good tip about staying anywhere in Madrid, is try to get a room with an indoor patio, because Madrileños love to party. And this is the downside if you are staying in the Posada del Dragón on the Cava Baja, is that you might get a window that overlooks the street. No, do not do that. Try and get one without a view, because Madrileños love to party until the wee hours of the morning. And if you're staying anywhere in the center, it's going to be noisy out on the street, but a lot less noisy if you're staying in the interior patio. And when summer hits and it gets really, really hot, these rooms looking out onto the interior patio are naturally cooler because it was an old form of air conditioning. Of course, you'll generally have air conditioning in the room, and always look out for that if you're staying in summer. By no means, never ever stay in summer without air conditioning in any area of Madrid whatsoever. That's just something you must look out for. I can't emphasize that enough. Anyway, La Latina is my big top tip because I think it's quieter than central Madrid, but even more charming. And it has this, it's just great for history buffs. You've got the Museo de la Historia de Madrid. So it's the old history of Madrid going up to medieval times. Anyway, I won't go on about that one because I have a post and I have a video on YouTube all about a guide to La Latina. So check that out. My next recommendation is Barrio de las Letras. Now, I have a sneaky reason for loving this area, and it's because I have a book about it. It's Madrid's literary district. And my good friend David Price has his bookshop there, Secret Kingdoms, and he commissioned me to write this book when he realized that he was smack bang in the area where Cervantes penned Don Quixote. Can you imagine it? It's lovely. And so you've got, unfortunately, Cervantes' house was knocked down, but you've got the house of Lope de Vega, who is what we call Siglo de Oro writer. The Siglo de Oro is this period in Madrid with a great artistic flourishing. So you might count the artist Velázquez in that period. So we're talking sort of around the early 16th century, early 17th century, late 16th century. But yeah, Barrio de las Letras is a nice area to stay in. Again, it's full of bars though. And so get that patio interior, because it might get noisy. Having said that, my parents stayed at Hotel Catalonia Atocha on Calle Atocha in Barrio de las Letras. And that was a fab choice because it's got great double glazing. And I thought they would suffer with the noise, but it didn't bother them one bit. So good double glazing can save your stay. But personally, I would go for the safe bet of staying looking out to a central courtyard. Right across from Barrio de las Letras is the area of Lavapiés. Now, with this one, I'd say tread carefully. So maybe stay at that side right across from Barrio de las Letras around the Metro Anton Martin, because you've not only got a lovely market of Anton Martin, you've got the cinema of Cinedore. Lavapiés has always been the area in which Madrid's downtrodden have lived. So back when Madrid first became Spain's capital, this meant that it was the Jewish conversos who lived in this area. And it was full of tanneries and it smelt terrible. It was also the area that the king mandated that all the brothels had to be, because he didn't want all this unseemliness spreading into the nicer areas of Madrid. In more recent years, from the 70s onwards, it's become Madrid's most multicultural area. But lately it's become cool. And that's been a double-edged sword because there's been a huge amount of gentrification, a huge amount of Airbnb flats coming in and driving up prices, and lots of what we call desahucios or evictions, which have been really, really hard fought by local grassroots campaigners. And this has had a knock-on effect of making the area the most aggressively anti-tourist. So unfortunately, in some parts of it, the situation has deteriorated so much, and I'm talking particularly in the area around Tirso de Molina and down from that people have been attacked, and I've had friends who've been attacked. So I'm not kind of overstating this case at all. I think generally you'll find Madrid really, really safe at night. So this has been a very surprising development that's happened in only the past few years. But I would say steer clear, and you're better off sticking Barrio de las Letras, La Latina. All these areas are much nicer and friendlier to you. And may I add a little side note that please try not to get an Airbnb flat, because this does negatively affect the accommodation problem in Madrid. It's much, much better to get a properly sanctioned tourist flat or a hotel or a hostel indeed. Anyway, moving on, let's have a look about the historic centre, where you've got all your major attractions. So you've got the palace and the Plaza Mayor. And I would say that this area can be difficult in terms of noise. So, Sol up to Plaza Mayor is incredibly crowded. So you will have to negotiate huge amounts of crowds, but you'll get access to the major attractions. And it has little squares where you can sort of dart off and discover beautiful areas at the same time. So it's still got its charm. I still love going to these areas. And if you'll forgive the plug again, if you buy a copy of Quiet Madrid, I cover this area and I show you all the little places where you can escape and get away from the crowds. Now, if you're staying there, I guess you're really staying there for its historic value. And where can you stay that's more historic than the Plaza Mayor? In what used to be the Casa de Carniceria, so the butchers, which stands right opposite the iconic panaderia. And the panaderia was where all the bread makers guild was, and opposite, and it's now, the tourist office, and equally the butchers guild is now where the Hotel Pestaña Colección Plaza Mayor is. And this ain't a bad place to stay at all, because you get gorgeous views of the square. If you're here in Christmas, it'll be all lit up and really, really beautiful. And they've got a nice rooftop pool. And shout out to their spa, because last year for my birthday, I went to the pool and sauna below ground, and I had such a nice relaxing time. I had a massage, I swam in the pool, I chilled out in the sauna. It was lovely. And the vibe, I thought the staff were really, really charming and nice. So I'd recommend that one. I also recommend just a few meters away. No, well, I suppose about 20 meters away or so, maybe more. The Posada del Peine. So you'd heard that word before. Along Carva Baja, there's all these posadas, which are old inns. And there is no inn older in Madrid than Posada del Peine, which was founded in 1610. Peine, incidentally, means comb. A friend of mine got this wrong and was referring to the Posada del Pene, which refers to the man's or gentleman's intimate parts, and got a big laugh when he was speaking Spanish. But he actually meant peine, which is a comb. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous hotel. Just go and look at the painted exterior, which has been renovated to perfection. I love it. And just a great place to stay if you're interested in all the history of Madrid. The next area you might want to consider, not staying bang smack in the middle of where all the major tourist sites are, is either Malasaña or Chueca. Now, I'm going to conflate them a little bit, even though Chueca is officially the gay barrio and Malasaña is more like cool young things. But I think these days they're equally cool young things. You'll just find more gay bars in Chueca. It's cool. It's fun. There's lots of fashionable shops, lots of partying, lots of noise. And inevitably, you'll probably be staying in a charming late 19th century hotel that's been, converted from tenement building. Beautiful, 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 but noisy as hell. So if you're a party person, go and stay in Chueco or Malasaña. Or if you're not a party person and that's your only choice, get your patio interior once again, because you will not sleep. A better alternative is to stay north in Chamberí. And this is my better alternative to Salamanca. And me being me, because, I'm a tour guide as well as a writer, and I love all the history of Madrid. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about why Chamberí is so nice and much nicer than Salamanca. Because after Salamanca was constructed, the first estates that went up in Chamberí were what's known as colonias. And I've got a whole blog post about this on my website, The Making of Madrid. Colonias were initially built under something called the Ley de Casas Baratas, the law of cheap housing, and they were built with working class professionals in mind. So there was one for postal workers, for instance. And these kept to the original Plan Castro plans. So they were built on a grid system, but they had green spaces. So important for a city, for any city really, to have beautiful parks and green spaces. And the loveliest green space in Chamberí has got to be Plaza de Olavide, where you can hang out and, rub shoulders with locals. It's beautiful, it's charming, it's elegant. Chamberí has since become high-end. So it's still pijo, which means posh. It's got lots of posh stores, posh galleries, but it's a little bit more affordable, a little bit more livable, and the urban planning is so much better than Salamanca, which, although Salamanca was built to sort of resemble Paris in the 19th century, and it's got its beauty from that side of things, it doesn't have any parks. Anyway, if you'll know me, I'm a bit of a broken record about parks and greenery. I think that Madrid really, really needs trees, and current local government don't agree with me, but I shall continue to bang the drum about that one. Chamberí is a great option if you're in town for a conference. So you should try and stay near Nuevos Ministerios station, which has a direct line up not only to Barajas Airport, but to the convention centre, IFEMA. And it's also a really great choice if you're in town for a football match, as you can just go up the road to Bernabeu, which is a little bit kind of a difficult trek if you're staying in any other part of the city. So, yeah, Chamberí is a good kind of recommendation. And now I want to talk about going beyond all that. Because in Madrid, you've got a fantastic metro system. And I was mentioning before, we've got a problem with housing. And this means that not only do locals struggle to make rent, people on a kind of your average budget struggle to afford hotels in the city centre now. It's just become really unaffordable. So one of the things you can do is stay in an area that's a little bit outside. And I'm going to mention, firstly, the line 3 of the metro, which is really handy. It leads right into Sol, which puts you right in the middle of all the major sites. And down there, you'll find, first you'll find Embajadores, and then Delicias, and then the station of Legazpi, which opens out into the Arganzuela district. Now, no one kind of thinks about these, but they're becoming cool, right? So Embajadores is just down from Lavapiés. It's a little bit more residential. I don't think the anti-tourism sentiment is quite as bad around there. Delicias is weirdly further down the line, but closer to the centre. And it's really great because you're right by the Reina Sofia. Now, I used to stay in Delicias years ago when my husband's grandma had a flat there. And it was kind of a creepy place because if anybody has been to the house of an elderly Spanish person, they'll find quite a lot of creepy paintings of Jesus with a crown of thorns on his head and blood running down his face. It's a little bit, yeah, lots of the flats around there are a little bit like that. But now a younger generation has moved in and it's becoming more hip. So you've got this lovely gallery that's housed in an old brewery called El Águila. Some cool new bars, some great places to eat and drink, but much, much cheaper. Further down, you've got Legazpi, which is right next to Matadero Arts Centre. And that's the area of Arganzuela. Do stay closer to Legazpi because transport links aren't great further along Arganzuela. You've also got the whole river. So if you like cycling, that's a fantastic place to stay because you can cycle all the way out into the countryside, either way, along the riverside. And yeah, I mean, I live a little bit further down in Usera, which is also conveniently on Line 3. I've got a whole blog post about Usera. I would say anti-tourism sentiment is coming up a little bit as an issue in Usera. We've got a couple of tourist flats in our plaza, and I've heard rumblings of people being quite disgruntled about all that. So maybe, I don't know, maybe not the best place to stay. But definitely do stay close to Line 3 because Usera is huge. Going back up north, because we're talking about the south then, I'd like to give a shout out to Tetuan, which is conveniently on Line 1. It's much cooler because it's in the north. It's much cooler in summer, great place to stay, much, much cheaper. I have to hold my hands up and admit that I don't know Tetuan neighbourhood terribly well. I've been there a few times. It seems pretty charming. Very similar vibe to Usera or Carabanchel, working class area, cheap, affordable, and ethnically diverse. Carabanchel, I should also mention, which is right next to Usera. Be careful where you stay because it's not great for connections, but it's great for people who love art because there's a whole load. It used to be an industrial area and all these sort of old factories are being converted into galleries. I absolutely love Veta, for instance, which is a free gallery showing cutting edge modern art. Really fantastic. And I think my last recommendation is going to be another one outside kind of what most people consider to be Madrid city centre, but actually walkable to the city centre and a beautiful walk if you don't mind hills. So this is the Puerta de Ángel, and you have to cross the Puente de Segovia to get there, which is a really old bridge of Madrid. But again, we're going to come up against this issue of gentrification. So it's kind of been very aggressively gentrified of late. A company calling themselves Madlin, which is sort of a play on the idea of Brooklyn. So this is Madrid's answer to Brooklyn, is the Madlin Company, funnily enough owned by a Spanish vulture fund. They're buying up tons and tons of property over there and opening up coffee shops and things and sort of really, really aggressively trying to change the vibe there. But I do have friends who live in the area. It's charming. It's lovely. You have the Mercado de Tirso de Molina, which is a beautiful place to go out to in the evening. Fantastic area, but this is sort of, you have to weigh things up a little bit. Or if you do stay somewhere like this, be very, very considerate of noise. Do stay in a proper hotel. But you will be saving a lot of money and just having to commute into the center. But with the travel pass so cheap, you really won't be wasting too much money. Anyway, that kind of rounds up my roundup of places to stay in Madrid. So do get in touch if you've heard this episode and you have anything you'd like to add. I always write a blog post based on the episode so I can update it whenever I want. Unfortunately, it's harder to update this podcast itself. But this is just, my point of view as a long-time Madrileña and sort of travel guide expert of where you should stay. All right. Thanks very much for listening. Bye-bye.